UFO Channel.
As we mentioned, Donald Trump today called for more military spending, more troops, more ships, more submarines, more planes. Didn't say how big the increase in military spending would be, but he did throw out a lot of numbers in justifying the increase.
And look at this, almost $600 billion in spending there, almost as much as all the other 9 of the top 10 combined. Anderson.
The Pentagon has secured a $630 billion budget for next year, even though it's failed to even account for the money it's received since 1996. A whopping $6.5 trillion of taxpayer cash have gone to defense programs, none of which has been audited. And this black budget has sparked concerns over political fraud.
A Reuters investigation says since 1996, the Pentagon has spent $8.5 trillion in taxpayer money that has never been accounted for.
One thing I found very interesting in this report is that the Pentagon apparently uses a standard operating procedure to enter false numbers or so-called plugs to cover lost or missing information in their accounting in order to submit a balanced budget to the Treasury. So they can write in everything.
I mean, that's probably the most shocking part of this, is that they get to the end of the day and they say, oh, there's money missing. What do we do? Well, we'll just put a number in there that says it's there, and we'll sort it out later. I mean, again, this is the type of operating practice that if you did it in your own business, if you tried to do it with your own taxes for the government, they'd haul you off to jail.
What is the Pentagon's black budget being used for? Weapons? Defense? This is the story of one military family's extraordinary claims. Claims that could be found true in a hidden reality.
I'm Phil Schneider. I spent 17 years in black budget programs, government geologist, as engineer, structural engineer with aerospace applications, self-taught metallurgist. In working with the black projects, I was involved in something very controversial, almost totally unbelievable to most of you. I was involved in building another base inside of Dulce, New Mexico, which is Los Alamos Laboratory. On the southwest part of the Archuleta Mesa, we were in the process of the early stages of building. We drilled 4 large tunnel-like holes. Some of them ran 2.5 miles under the surface. Anyway, after we drilled all 4 holes, it took about 2 days to drill all 4 of them. And when you build an underground base, you drill 4 basic holes, and then you build called stopes or cross-member holes across, and then you use blasting equipment, and you literally blast out or tunnel out or deflagrate or melt rock out. The equipment kept coming up broken. So we wanted to go down, we wanted to send somebody down there, a human observer, or human observers in this case, to find out what was going on. When I saw Green Beret and Black Beret people encamped inside of our geologist camp, I knew something was up, the gig was up. In this process, I was lowered down the basket of one of these holes, and about from me to this elderly woman here in the front was sitting a 7-foot-tall alien gray. The stench was worse than the worst garbage can you can imagine. I didn't waste any time or reach for my pistol. At that time, as an engineer, I didn't have time to carry all the folderol of one of these big submachine guns that all the seed spray and the yellow fruit and the outer perimeter and inner perimeter security people carried. I carried a little Walter PPK pistol with a 9-shot clip. Plus, you're in almost like a spacesuit environment, and you're reaching for a gun. It's not the easiest thing to do, and then to pop a clip in it and start shooting. And I killed 2 of them. Yes, they're mortal, and they do die. However, in the process, one of them did this. All I remember is that he just kind of waved his hand in front of his chest, and the next thing I know, this blue beam hit me and just literally opened me up like a fish. It was some form of electrical force, because the kind of like being hit by a lightning bolt burned all my toenails off of me. And there was a Green Beret that was right behind me. But he risked his life. He shoved me back in the basket and hit the button and took me up. I wouldn't be alive talking to you today if it wasn't for him. I'm forever indebted. He lost his life. 66 Secret Service agents, Green Berets, Black Berets, crack troops lost their lives because the government, our United States government, lied, did not tell us anything about the alien threat. There's a war underneath there, and I'm talking dead serious. The large alien grays had been encamped there for as best as believed possible about 400 or 500 years. It had been one of their internal bases. And we drilled holes right on top of it. All the stinking air, all the black sooty air came right out as soon as the first hole was sunk, and all this soot came up. And, well, that's when all the hell broke loose, really, all started. I have a picture of one of the aliens been working for the United States Pentagon for the last 58 years. His name is Valiant Thor. He's right here. There's my father in the background. This whole place, the ready room of the USS Eldridge, Al Bielek has probably explained, or maybe even shown you this picture. There's a list of some of the notable people in it. They're all the atomic bomb scientists of the day, all the time variant experimentalists of the day, all the top physicists of that particular day. This was in August of 1943.
Phil Schneider gave most of his lectures in 1995. He gained a following speaking around the United States, telling people about his alleged experiences. Phil claimed that he personally knew people who also worked in black budget programs who were murdered, and that most of them were made to look like a suicide.
11 of my best friends in the last 22 years have been murdered. 8 of them called suicide. I finally got wind of one of them. Portland police is now involved in one of them. Murder by suicide, they call it.
On August 6, 1993, 2 years before his lectures, one of Phil's best friends, Ron Rummel, was found dead in St. Maclay Park, Oregon. He had suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the head, and a gun was found nearby. Police ruled it as suicide, but Phil and many others strongly believed that he was murdered. Ron Rummel was best known for publishing the Alien Digest, a newsletter filled with stories and testimonies regarding the UFO cover-up.
Author Ron Rummel was about to publish a book revealing what he believed to be the real purpose of the Star Wars project when his body was found here in Maclay Park in Portland, Oregon. His death was ruled suicide, but few agree with that verdict.
As far as the police and the FBI are concerned, it's case closed. Unfortunately, there's the shocking thing that his murderer, I believe his murderer, is still out there at large.
Why is it you're speaking out?
There have been enough lives taken under the premise of suicide when they were actually very stable individuals. They had families and they had lives to look forward to, and they had every reason to live. And if there is some form of conspiracy out there, then the more people that are talking might end up saving lives in the long run. My friend Ronald Lee Rummel is an Air Force officer. He's a Silver Star winner. There's a good chance that when I fly back to to Vegas, I have to drive home. I left my car down in Vegas. I have to drive home alone. I'm scared to hell.
On January 17th, 1996, after not being seen for at least 5 days, Phil Schneider was found dead in his apartment by his landlord and a detective from the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. The autopsy report listed the cause of death as unknown, but it was later discovered that Phil was actually strangled by his own catheter hose. Was this a case of negligence or a cover-up?
There's a number of you ladies present, so I won't gore you out, but Al has seen some of the wounds, and there's a few other people that have been to a few of my other lectures, and they can attest that I have been shot. I've been run off the road. I've been pushed off the road.
This is an account of Phil's death, a case that reeks of suspicion, neglect of duty, and disregard for human dignity. The first official police report defines Phil's cause of death to be from natural causes. On January 16, 1996, Deputy Officer McClelland is alerted by a suspicious apartment manager that he has not seen Phil for weeks. Upon first investigation, when entering Phil's apartment, Officer McClelland finds Phil's body beside his bed, with his face lying in the seat of his own wheelchair. Medical and forensic examiner Mr. Coleman chooses not to respond to the crime scene. At this point, Phil had been dead for 3 to 4 days. January 17th, his body is then whisked away to a funeral home. January 18th, Mr. Took calls from the funeral home to alert the police that he has found a catheter cord wrapped around Phil's neck. This leads to the starting of Detective Hagen's investigation on the same day. Hagen seems to be the only one interested in following up this case honestly. He calls medical examiner Coleman and Sergeant Joyce, who both elect not to respond. Upon further investigation, while interrogating Deputy McClelland, the deputy recalls the catheter cord being near Phil's neck at the scene of the crime. It is concluded in this report that the only person who could have been around Phil at this time was a woman from the Oregon Senior and Disabled Services. Other things recovered from the scene of the investigation were 7 pill medications. Detectives Harris and Kennel are then assigned to the case. An autopsy is to be held by Dr. Gunson on January 19th. This was requested as well by Cynthia, Phil's late wife. The autopsy report surmises Phil's cause of death by asphyxiation, ruled a suicide. Recovered stomach material showed no signs of pills. Furthermore, blood and urine are placed on a 3-month hold, only to be reported as lost when Cynthia calls after the given time has passed. The catheter cord is described as being wrapped around the neck once and then tied from the front very tight. Now, you must ask yourself, how can Phil be found dead via strangulation with his face in the seat of his own wheelchair? Is this something that he could do himself without taking any form of medical assistance in order to sedate? What do we have here? Is this a clean-cut case of suicide? Or could there likely be foul play? Could this be a case of murder by suicide? This case was determined on January 19th as death by suicide, which is further indicated on his death certificate. But something of even more suspicion appears in this case. In the Oregonian obituaries, a statement is given, not by Cynthia, that he died from a stroke.
So, what happened here?
Trying to get some samples of Phil, my dad, and my mom. They were suddenly missing. Mysteriously missing.
And what did they say? They were just as surprised as you were?
Yeah. Oh, we don't have those samples.
It's like they never did, or they just
They
just didn't even know.
They said we'll hold them for a year. Mom came back 11 months before the due date, there's 1 month until they would not hold them anymore. And, they suddenly didn't have them anymore. Yeah.
Look, let's get right down to it. When you're dealing with something of the magnitude, what it appears to be, that is the presence of a variety of non-humans here on Earth that are here for some sort of agenda, and everything else that goes along with that, including possible collaboration by various human groups with them. This is obviously incredibly explosive material. And so it goes without saying that the intelligence agencies, the deep black agencies, ops groups that are involved in this would need to keep this as quiet as possible. They would have to, for their own preservation. So in other words, secrecy becomes the ultimate goal for this, and that means secrecy, in theory, forever. Forever. Secrecy forever. If there are leaks that are going to come out about this, you have to find a way to disable those leaks. Either by disabling the information or the individual behind it. Doesn't have to be by killing them. It could mean by ruining their reputation, by discrediting them in one way or another. That's just as good. Certainly one thing that we know in the last 60, 70 years is that assassination techniques have become very, very sophisticated. Very sophisticated. The art of suiciding someone, that is, killing them, making it be a suicide. This is widespread. It's been widespread for many years. During the days of the Cold War, The KGB was very good at this. To this day, you're not going to get the CIA to admit it, but we know that this happened. It happened in the case of a fellow named Frank Olson in the early 1950s, who had been a biological warfare expert who was given LSD without knowledge by a CIA friend. Long story short, he was taken to a large hotel in New York City, the 10th floor, and was thrown up the window. Made it seem like a suicide. It was no suicide. Olson was killed because he had become a security risk. This is an old game. So back to our scenario here of multiple non-human groups with possible human-alien interaction going on. This is a secret that has to be kept from their point of view. And anyone who threatens that secrecy has got to be handled, whether by discrediting that person or failing all else by killing.
Upon examination, it seems easy to accept the theory that Phil was a victim of homicide. But what does that mean for his claims of aliens living underground? Years after Schneider's death, other claims of a joint human-alien base underneath Dulce, New Mexico are surfacing left and right. The book UFO Highway by Anthony Sanchez is essentially transcripts of interviews with a person only known as Colonel X, who supposedly worked inside this facility and is known to believe that Phil Schneider was really there. Shows like History Channel's UFO Hunters have even visited the area looking for clues.
It's a 14-mile underground tunnel that goes under that mountain there.
Yes. Even Jesse Ventura's conspiracy theory on True TV paid a visit to the alleged location of the Dulce base.
They have it pretty well secured.
Do they?
Yeah.
Some other pretty credible sources for alien activity in the Archuleta Mesa include the high number of Apache Native Americans who have some pretty insane stories of strange happenings in the area.
Rumor has it there is a secret base hidden underneath the Archuleta Mesa here. The mountain overlooks Dulce. Some people in town say the base is run by aliens working with our federal government to conduct mind control and genetic experiments. Do you believe that?
Yeah. Well, a whole bunch of people seen it, you know.
Like the ground opened out, steam coming out of it.
Jerry Julian says she had her first extraterrestrial encounter right here on her Dulce ranch about 40 years ago.
It was huge. I just saw the bottom of it. You know, it was like this.
Many of her neighbors claim similar strange sightings.
Fat in the middle and kind of like rounded on the sides. You're speechless, you know? You just don't know what to think.
Sometime in the 70s, things changed. That's when cows started turning up mutilated.
They just cut out in between the legs right here. We seen one.
I know it's not a predator that's doing it. There's someone's doing it.
Local police never definitively said who's to blame. Locals say it has to be something out of this world. They say they know it sounds crazy.
I'll submit to a lie detector test or anything.
To be fair, at this point we have to also play devil's advocate with Phil Schneider's extraordinary claims. It is entirely possible that he simply heard about the tales of UFOs and underground bases in the Archuleta Mesa area and made up his own story based on those stories. In order to at least make an attempt at finding out if he was telling the truth or not, we must first know who Phil Schneider was.
I kind of knew about Philip. I mean, I had met him through the Oregon Agate and Mineral Society in Portland, Oregon. And I had been a past president of the society. We had about 500 members. So, you know, it was a large group of people who came together every other week to study rocks and minerals.
What year was this?
1985. Philip grew up in a Navy Armed Force family because he was all over places with his dad. So let's see, while he was young, I think they also went to London. It was in the early 50s, 1950s. So he was in London, and I think that's when Oscar was working in NATO. He was doing a lot of armed force work in NATO. But he kind of knew that his dad was doing a lot of top secret things later on in life.
I'd like to also mention something about my father. My father was a U-boat captain
in Hitler's Navy. He was captured by the French, turned over to the Third Army, U.S. Third Army, and then U.S. Third Army turned him over to the Navy. And he was a master machinist. Now, that's not a journeyman. A master means they can take a block of metal and make a gun or a watch or some other fine instrument. He was a master machinist. He later became an MD doctor and part of the aerospace medicine group of the United States Navy, was instrumental in helping build the USS Nautilus and its predecessor, the Enterprise, the first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and other ships like it.
Phil's father, Oscar Otto Schneider, was also involved in government secrecy and black projects. In the 1990s, during Phil Schneider's lecture tour across the United States, he was known to carry many documents and pictures providing evidence to certain testimony about controversial subjects he would be discussing. Furthermore, there were 4 documents which Phil carried with him on lecture tour. These documents were allegedly owned by Oscar Schneider while he was in office working for the United States Navy in the 1950s. During this time, the rumored Philadelphia experiment took place, and perhaps these documents are the smoking gun that prove, in fact, the Philadelphia experiment did occur. The first document details an autopsy report on one of the crew members from the Philadelphia experiment.
One of the letters that Oscar wrote about the autopsy of the Philadelphia experiment crew members, the items that he was pulling out of their back of their eyes and their arms and their legs, these little things that looked like transistors. That's exactly what they were. They were little surveillance items that were placed into the bodies of the Philadelphia experiment crew members.
In this letter, it is addressed to Lieutenant Nathan F. Twining. Oscar seems to report on the vessel, which Twining's staff couldn't find. Furthermore, it includes an order from J. Edgar Hoover to have all personnel undergo psychological testing. The third letter addresses Edward Condon. Edward Condon is well known for his involvement explaining away all UFO phenomenon as simply optical illusions. However, in this letter, Oscar seems to be reporting to Edward that 7 Philadelphia Project experiencers had escaped from a psych ward that Oscar was holding and testing them at. He goes on to say that J. Edgar had declared the incident classified as a 1A prime directive, possibly meaning something in regards to a top-secret security clearance, finishing this letter with a reference to Nikola Tesla's spatial analyzer. This is significant because Nikola Tesla has always been known to be involved with the design of the machine which would create the fabled Philadelphia experiment's invisible technology. Condon, having been known most notoriously as the leading UFO debunker of his time, paved the way for secrecy and cover-ups in this realm that we study today. The fourth and final letter, Oscar Schneider writes again, in consideration of the latent facts considering the fate of the USS Fahrenheit DE-173, all ships' personnel and material must be quarantined absolute until further notice. No exceptions. An on-site naval inspection is ordered forthwith, as Bureau of Ships reticent requirements in Section 93A. Please include DE-173's ship's log to Admiral Roscoe Hillenkolt, USN. Consider them and all events of nature above secret. C-Class ARH-9, Project Blue Sky. Oscar Schneider, Captain, USN.
At this point, it appears that Phil Schneider's father, Oscar, was very likely involved in classified operations that involved top-secret technologies. But what about his son, Phil? What do we really know about his work?
I would say late 60s, he started his work, and then I have Social Security records under a wrong Social Security number, and I think this is how the Black Ops get away with a lot of things, is they put you under the wrong Social Security number so you can't prove your work history with that. But I can prove that under the wrong Social Security number, he worked for Morrison Knudsen, which is a contractor, it's a civilian contractor that works for the Army or Navy. He did some work in Trojan Nuclear after that. By the early 1980s, he was applying for SSI. So I know by the early 1980s, his career is done. He's so injured that he could not do any more work, and his memory is like totally lost as to what he did before. It wasn't until after we got married and he got good medical care and it stopped taking the medications he was taking when I first met him that he started to remember all of the things that are now on the internet.
Hello, Marie. Lots of food, soft drink.
So tell me when did Phil start telling you about his past and his work?
It was soon after. He kept saying that he had to take Dilantin to prevent seizures. But I noticed when he took Dilantin, he would have a seizure. It was the other way around. It was actually killing him. And it was disrupting him emotionally, physically, so much that he didn't have much of a memory of anything in his past. And then after we were married, he got really good medical care. It slowly started to come back. I mean, it was like, he would even say to me, gee, I hope you don't think I'm like lying because I'm just remembering this, but wow, you know, these things start coming up and I just suddenly remember what's really happened. But that's really when it started. When Oscar died, it might have been 94, Philip went down into his basement and found a file cabinet full of stuff that was just unbelievable. And he showed me most of that. I mean, I saw the original envelopes with the original paperwork that had the drawings on it. I saw the original photographs with the stamps on the back from the Navy. I mean, it was all real stuff. This was not faked. He shared so much with me, even though we were divorced at the time. So I saw all this stuff that came out of the file cabinet. But he'd been talking to Ron about it a lot. They were doing a little alien magazine, a little digest. And then his dad died and he found all this stuff in the basement. Well, Ron was murdered that same year. And that infuriated. As Philip grew up, he went to Lincoln High School here in Portland, because I have a transcript of his senior high school. So that was pretty normal, except it does indicate on that transcript that he had an IQ of 163. Now, I know Philip told me that before he had his medical issues, he could speak 11 languages. And I believe that because he would suddenly, in the middle of the night, sleeping together, he would suddenly start rattling off different languages. So this is all though in his sleep, he consciously couldn't remember how to speak those languages, but in his sleep, unconsciously, he could still connect with some of them.
This is the new one. Good. Now look outside to the left. Can you see two big clouds?
Philip.
First of all, the idea of underground bases and underground civilizations, this is a very old idea in human history. You know, going back even thousands of years, you've got ancient tribes around the world that have made these claims. We would say it's in their myths, but that there are secret caverns, secret races, secret tribes that exist under the ground. And really, when one talks about, for example, hollow earth theory, that's a lot of what we're talking about here. Not all hollow earth theorists say that the entire earth is hollow. A lot of them will say that there are just substantial caverns under the ground where there are civilizations that are down there. So that's an old idea. You get it in a lot of ancient European, I think like the Germans have a tradition, Native Americans have this tradition. The Tibetans may have the most extensive tradition of this, for all I know. South America, traditional tribes have this as well. So the idea in the Tibetan tradition from what I have understood about it, is that there are different races below the surface of the Earth, including reptoid or reptilian races that are supposedly from other worlds. Not making this up. So that by itself is interesting, and you might ask, why do all of these disparate civilizations have these types of ideas? And I don't have the answer to that. But I can tell that's an old idea.
Dolan goes on to explain the supposed connection between the Nazis and Tibetan Hollow Earth theories.
But when you really get into the 20th century, where the Nazis and their predecessors, which was called the Thule Society, which was a kind of a mystical sect that the Nazis really drew a lot out of in forming their own ideology. The Thule Society was very interested in Tibetan myths about openings into the earth. This idea of deep underground tunnels, bases, crisscrossing the world. And since this was a Tibetan idea, we have to assume that the Nazis themselves were familiar with this idea as well.
There's no question that the secret underground bases do exist. And by the way, it's not only the military of the United States or of other countries, who are making these underground and also undersea facilities. Other agencies and organizations do it as well. All that is needed is the requisite will, funding, expert personnel, and technology. In the early to mid 20th century, you had the French, of course, who constructed the so-called Maginot Line in eastern France to guard against German invasion in World War II. There was a military civil engineering organization in the Third Reich called the Todt Organization, and it was named after Fritz Todt. Fritz Todt was a brilliant civil engineer. He was the father of the German Autobahn system. During the World War II period, Adolf Hitler asked Fritz Todt to lend his engineering expertise to the military program of the Third Reich, which he did. He established an engineering agency which was called the Todt Organization. Now, Fritz Todt died in a plane crash in 1942, and one of his deputies named Xaver Dorsch took over control of the agency. I did find a couple of Project Paperclip memos from 1947 that specifically requested Xaver Dorsch by name to be brought to the United States to work on the United States military's underground plant construction program. The American military certainly was well aware of who Xaver Dorsch was and his expertise. In his day, he was probably the preeminent authority on underground base construction, whether in Germany or in the United States.
Ruins have been uncovered in Argentina, but they're not from an ancient civilization. They're reportedly connected with the Nazi regime. According to an article in the New Zealand Herald, a secret bunker was found which appears to have been planned for members of the Nazi Party to use as a hideout after losing the war and fleeing to South America.
But I've had people tell me that some of the bases are as deep as 10, 12, 14 miles down.
Okay, so if they're 1 mile deep, how would they make that? Like, can you state possibly a piece of technology that you came across in documents you were researching? Or...
Oh yes. Since at least the 1950s, the mining and civil engineering industries have had the capability to sink major shafts straight down 1, even 2 miles or more, and then to tunnel out from the bottom of the shafts, whether for mining purposes or for entry tunnel complexes. One of the most common form is to use very hard cutting heads on the tunnel boring machines that rotate. It would be like a huge version of the drills used in the petroleum industry and natural gas industry to drill very deep underground boreholes.
I've heard theories of also nuclear power drills.
Yes, I cite this technology in my first book. These are called subterranes. Subterranes are nuclear powered. They use a small fission nuclear reactor. The nuclear reactor is contained within a machine. The research and design was done at Los Alamos National Laboratories back in the 20th century. And there were some patents granted to the research team at Los Alamos. If they are in use, they are being used clandestinely in great secrecy.
Could you also maybe lend to the audience some examples of real underground facilities?
The most famous one would be under Cheyenne Mountain in Colorado, which used to be the NORAD headquarters. Now it's a backup NORAD base, but that would be the most famous one. I guess it's appeared in many movies. It is large, it is sophisticated, it is deep. Then you also have the famous FEMA underground base beneath Mount Weather in Northern Virginia. It's run by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. It's also quite deep, sophisticated, large. There's a so-called Site R complex that is the Pentagon's alternate command center, which is underground on the border between Maryland and Pennsylvania. Then, of course, you have the well-known Area 51 facility. There's been quite a lot of underground tunneling excavation done there. Many people have spoken about facilities out there.
Yes, sir.
Let's go back to that so-called Area 51, because in people's minds, when you say I can't talk about it because it's classified, conjures up, oh, there it is. There's the cover-up. Can you give us any hint, without violating any sense of confidential nature, what kinds of things might be happening?
Sir, I cannot. Forgive me. I just do not know.
Is there anyone in the Air Force that can?
I'm going to have to defer that to public affairs. It's outside of my area of expertise.
Do you believe in UFOs?
Personally, no, sir. Ma'am, I have no reason to believe that they're real.
And then there are other ones that are perhaps less well known. The NSA in Laurel, Maryland, which is at Fort Meade. Fort Meade is an armed facility, but the NSA is actually the major activity there. And there are just literal acres, multiple acres of supercomputers beneath Fort Meade that go down and down and down. I've been told 20 levels, maybe more. And then Los Alamos National Lab in northern New Mexico. Then you have Camp David in Maryland. Many people are familiar with Camp David as a United States presidential retreat where presidents often helicopter to for rest and relaxation. But less commonly known is that there is a massive underground facility that spreads out for miles. In the run-up to the first war against Iraq, Bechtel built 3 deeply buried, sophisticated underground facilities in Saudi Arabia. They were used during the war, the first war. Stoner Norman Schwarzkopf, who was the American military commander, has spent most of that war underground in Saudi Arabia. And the Chinese, it has come to light that the Chinese have constructed something like 3,000 miles of underground tunnels to house their nuclear arsenal.
What's the benefit of building all of these bases in and around the world? What is it for? Is it for keeping things secret? And what are they keeping secret? Is it for keeping things away from the public? Is it also for protection in some way? Could you elaborate on that?
Yes to all of that. All of those are considerations. The motivation for going deep underground and or deep undersea is often driven by concerns of security and secrecy. Weapons production and storage happens underground, whether for nuclear weapons or other kinds. This has been going on ever since the World War II period.
It looks almost like a scene from an action movie. Dozens of ballistic missile launching systems inside a gigantic cave. But the video shows Iran's missile program is very real and very big, as the head of the Elite Revolutionary Guard's Aerospace Division says. The missiles in various ranges are mounted on launchers in all bases and are ready to be launched, he told an Iranian state TV reporter, and added, that is, if enemies make a mistake.
You also have scientific research facilities underground. The CERN Super Collider on the border of Switzerland and France would be a good example. That one is very much publicly known and discussed. There are other underground research facilities, including at Area 51 and elsewhere, that operate much more out of the public eye. There are many rumors about clandestine extraterrestrial facilities, both underground and undersea, and a growing number of people have come forward over the years with anecdotal accounts of having seen and or been taken into such facilities by a variety of reasons, both by extraterrestrials and also by shadowy elements of the United States military, by clandestine units. I do take these stories seriously. I do believe that these types of facilities exist. What are the reasons that they would be here in underground? Again, for secrecy, for security, and for purposes of communication, command, and control. The same reasons that the United States military builds underground bases.
Secrecy, how corporations and military rule the underworld.
I spent years going through reams of technical documentation from the military-industrial complex, and Morrison Knudsen is one of those that would pop up in the bibliographies. Companies like Parsons, Brinkerhoff, Clay, Douglas, Hewitt, Black & Vetch. Of course, you have two military agencies, the Army Corps of Engineers, which is definitely involved in constructing underground bases and tunnels. It has been for more than half a century. You also have the U.S. Navy Seabees, who also work in underground and undersea construction. Those would be two of the lead military agencies, but there are large corporations that are involved. The Bechtel Corporation is one. Then you have the tunnel boring machine companies such as the Robbins Company. A number of these companies, which for decades have worked very closely with not only the United States military agencies, but also other agencies in construction of underground facilities and tunnels. These are massive undertakings, and to do that, you need to have large organizations with a bureaucratic and administrative structure that's capable of supporting projects like this. You won't easily find this stuff on the internet. I found these documents by going to federal document repositories at major university libraries in the United States and also to federal agency document repositories. With these corporations, it's like a shell game, and it's harder and harder to find out who is working for whom and what they're doing and under what conditions. The so-called Morrison Knudsen is now owned by something called URS as of 2007. So you see, it makes it hard to follow what they're doing and to follow the money and the contracts, because the names and the corporate alliances are constantly changing in a state of flux at a very high level.
Now, these mega bases are gobbling up our gross national product. Right now, we're spending 28% of the gross national product on building underground bases solely. That doesn't count for the defense budget. That doesn't count for the spare parts budget. And the black budget is dead wrong. It sidesteps the United States Congress and its Constitution of its people and says you're a bunch of morons you don't need to know. Now, all this alien thing is fine, except for one thing. Alien takeover is a serious threat. Kept totally out of the public view, off the surface, I'm sure the underground bases, without question, are being used as a place to house alien takeover. Alien takeover means the implementation of a one-world government. Direct opposite of constitutional law. Direct opposite of freedom of choice, freedom of religion, other freedoms that go with it. Right to bear arms. If we allow another election to go by with the same ilk in the White House, we have only ourselves to blame.
Well, one question that arises is whether or not there is the legendary, much talked about deal between human government groups and non-humans, the human alien deal. You know, all I can say at this point is that anything is possible. I do believe that there are a number of other beings that are here. So if that is possible, is it then possible that such a deal went wrong? For example, what would the deal have included? It could have included we humans getting certain technologies and knowledge from them in exchange for them having the ability to do certain things in our society without us giving them hassle for it. For them having a permanent base somewhere, maybe in Nevada. For them every now and then taking a human being to examine them but then returning them. This is the claim of the human alien deal. And the claim furthermore is that we learned during the 70s and 80s that they were not abiding by their agreement. That they were taking humans, not telling us, not telling the government, and so forth. None of this, I have any idea if this is true or not. I have no idea. What I would say is that it would very much be in the interest of a visiting race to make a deal with the U.S. government. Why not? Sure, they might be able to wipe us out if they felt like it, but maybe that's too much of a hassle for them. Maybe it's just a lot easier to deal with the local governing power. And so it would make sense to make an arrangement with the local strongman, which would be the U.S. military, U.S. government. And if you really want to get, subterranean here, so to speak, there would be a lot of benefit from a visiting race of extraterrestrials to exploit Earth and humanity to the max. A lot of folks in this field believe that any visiting ET race would, by their nature, be peaceful and nonviolent. I never agreed with this. I don't understand at all why, just because you have better technology, then that means you're nicer. You could be just as exploitative. Look at human history. We've got great technology these days. It doesn't mean we're any less exploitative than people were 5,000 years ago. Well, look, if you come from someplace that's not here, it really makes sense, doesn't it, to create a secure environment for yourself, probably under the ground. It's the best place to be. All the features of planet Earth are suitable for human beings. They may not be as suitable for some other type of species that didn't come from here. When I go through the various witness reports, alleged reports of encounters that people have had with these other entities, that also reinforces my opinion that we're dealing with multiple groups. So at this point in the game, my working assumption is that humanity right now is interacting really on a covert basis with multiple highly intelligent non-human groups that are here. And they're here for purposes that might very well be quite varied. It's not necessarily the case that they all have one agenda. Now, some of these groups, some of these entities, according to, again, witness accounts, are like the prototypical Greys, that is the short, humanoid, large black eyes, big head. Another type of non-human that's been discussed are reptoid types, that is, large, kind of intimidating reptilian creatures. Yet another type that's been reported are what we might call mantid or insectoid type creatures. All of this is bizarre, but yet these reports are consistent across many, many years and many different types of people, and some who are utterly ignorant of the lore or of the literature about this, and they still report these, ordinary people. So that gives me pause. That makes me really wonder if these reports are consistent with some of the more ancient myths that people have reported back in earlier times.
Deep underground military bases. Extraterrestrials living beneath Earth's surface. A race that might not even be from another planet, but rather one that has existed here in the shadows throughout mankind's entire development. Is this the biggest cover-up in our history? Or just another conspiracy theory? In 2017, we still have no definitive proof that any of these claims are true, which is all the more reason why this just might be one of the greatest journalistic responsibilities of our time.
And I'm not asking you to believe me in total. I am asking you to seriously do enough homework that you can go out in through the public record, through the congressional records, find out who's voting for what, and go from there. Do your own program. do your own agenda and do your own speaking out. And if enough of us do this, there is some saving grace.
We'd like to ask for your input. Share your opinion and expertise with us in the comments after watching the video. If you're a subscriber, you'll always get a heart from us as a small thank you, and we'll pin your important post to the top where everyone will read it first. Just make sure you've already subscribed, like the video, and mention both at the beginning of your comment.